Whatever space you occupy mentally in the long run, that's the space that you're going to end up in. What is the outcome that matters the most to you? If you don't have a outcome or a big goal or an ambition that you're going after right now in life, or what's your reason for getting out of bed in the morning? What's the reason for you going to work? Why do you open your laptop or turn on your mic and do anything if you don't have a goal that you're looking to reach? It's getting clear on what it is you want to achieve. Napoleon Hill said in Think and Grow Rich that a definite chief aim is the starting point of all achievement, or a burning desire. So what is it that you want to accomplish? And when you're clear on that, then we can kind of build everything else. We can deconstruct everything else from that point, because then we can measure every activity or every behavior by, is this getting us closer to achieving that, or is it getting us further away?
All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Dre Baldwin, who is the CEO and founder of Work on Your Game, Inc. He's given 4 TEDx talks and has authored 35 books. I'm still working on my first one, so that's impressive. Dre's content has been consumed over 103 million times, which I honestly believe that I've watched when I used to play basketball. His daily Work on Your Game masterclass has amassed over 2,900 episodes and over 7.3 million listeners. Dre has had a 9-year professional basketball career playing in 8 countries. And Dre's framework is the roadmap in reverse for professional mindset strategies and systems and accountability. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me on, Maxime. Hopefully I can live up to that bio.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you will. I've watched a lot of your content, man. So first of all, I'm very excited to have you on the show. Like I was telling you before we started recording, I was like, I'm talking with Dre. I better go play some basketball before we get started. So if my face is all red, that's why. I just finished sweating. So yeah.
That was normal to me.
Yeah, awesome. So man, before we get into the things that you've accomplished, I always like to understand the story behind the man. So I'm curious to know what was it about your journey and your story that brought you to be in this place of success? And I'm not necessarily talking about the whole, brought up and traditional story that people are used to sharing, but what were the pivotal moments that made you throughout the years?
I would say most important is just getting introduced to sports, because it let me use 2 personal attributes, which was I had the athletic genes and also am competitive. So I would have to start with that. Another thing I would say is my parents were, especially my mom, she was an educator. So she had us, my sister and I, reading from a very young age. So that piece was really important. And the next thing I would say is just the challenge of trying to make it as an athlete, because I got to tap into that competitiveness. And also as I moved up, especially when I was trying to get into the pro levels, just having to tap into my marketing and sales skills, which didn't even know I had. So I had to use them and get myself into the sports world, and then using it more when I got online and started to build my brand online. Before that was a normal thing to do. And then in that transition period, when I was going from being an athlete to, or at least when I started to transition my message from just talking to athletes, Maxime, to talking to people who were not athletes, it was just understanding the opportunity, just noticing the opportunity when it was there, which is, I probably had to do that many times in life, then take the initiative to actually do something about that opportunity that I had noticed. So just seeing it alone is not enough. I had to do something about it. So there many times I had to do that. So I would probably point to those.
Yeah. So how you mentioned sales and marketing and going to play pro ball. How does that come along? Because I stopped at the college level after, but obviously everyone that plays ball has the aspiration of going to play for the NBA or kind of go and play overseas. How did that come in, the sales and marketing aspect?
Well, because I went to a Division III college, and that's a level that doesn't usually produce professional athletes. And most of the players at the D3 level aren't even thinking that they're going to make it as a pro athlete. So they don't even suffer the disappointment of not making it because they don't even try. So me coming out of that D3 level, I knew I was I was behind the eight ball. I was going up against the grain and trying to even make it in the first place. And I realized, number one, that not many people from my background are going to make it, and I'm not going to be looked at as some blue chip professional prospect because of my pedigree. And secondly, I realized that there are way more players who think they can play pro ball and want to than there are actual jobs. So I knew that just off playing alone, and this is the way most athletes see it, we would love if we could just play and not have to do anything else. And just off playing alone, we can advance and move forward and make money and have our careers. And most of the pro athletes you know about, that is how they do it. Now, I, again, was coming from a different type of background. So I knew on playing alone, I wasn't going to get even seen, let alone would I convince anybody. So I realized, okay, I'm going to have to do something that's going to separate me from these other players out here who all also think they're good enough. And just on the surface, there's no way that I can, quote unquote, prove that I'm a better player than them. Of course, we can get on the court and play, but is there really that much difference between me and these other 500 guys? And we're all going after, let's say, 4 or 5 available jobs. The answer was no. So I realized, okay, what can I do? I can go to an exposure event, which is what I did. It's basically a job fair for athletes, and get a scouting report that has somebody else saying that I'm good as opposed to just me saying it, and some proof for me playing against pro level players. And then I had to get an agent. An agent is basically the go-between in the sports world between the jobs and the people, the players. And I went and sold myself to an agent. So usually agents call you and they're trying to sell themselves to you. I called the agent and tried to sell myself to them. And I was able to do both of those successfully. And that's really how I got my foot in the door. And then once you get one job, okay, now you have some credibility. You're established. Then when you get the second job, okay, that's even more. So each success kind of built on the next one. So that's how the marketing piece worked into basketball.
What was the first spot that you went to go play after you got your agent and kind of got that first job?
The first job was Kaunas, Lithuania, 2005.
Beautiful. And then it kind of just rolled from there, because I know you played in 8 different countries, right?
That's right.
Before we started recording, you also mentioned you went plant-based almost 10 years ago. Like, what was the reasoning behind you wanting to kind of make a little bit more of that transition towards a plant-forward lifestyle?
Yeah, great question. So this was probably around, it was about 2013, and then we're having this conversation in 2024. I happened to be running into several people, most of them, actually all of them were females, who were having some type of, not just default eating lifestyle, I guess we can say. So people who were vegan, people who were, what's the other one? Vegetarian, people who were clean eating is what people were saying back then. And when they would tell me about it, I would just ask them, why? What's the reason for that? And they would explain, or someone would tell me how they had an affinity for animals and how they saw how animals got treated. Or someone would explain to me all the stuff that goes into a lot of processed foods, or the stuff that goes into animals in order to mass produce them so they can be slaughtered and they can become our food. And showed me a couple of the documentaries, which I didn't know about at that time, which a lot of people know about them all now. And as I got more information, I just started asking more questions. And I had a friend who really she kind of explained to me how I could still do it. Because I was thinking like, hey, maybe I could do that. But I had a couple of hangups. Number one, is there enough food out there for me to still eat if I was to go plant-based? Number two, I'm an athlete and I have muscles, so how am I going to get the stuff that feeds and maintains my muscles if I'm not eating any meat? Because again, my ignorance, I didn't know. And she explained that stuff to me. She said, well, all you need, and when you eat, you need a vegetable, you need a protein, you need a starch. And I think that's what she said. And she just explained it to me. When you put food on your plate, all right, these are the things that need to be in your meals, and you don't need to eat animals in order to get it. So as she explained it more to me, it made more sense to me. And then I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And when I make a decision, I'm going to do something, I do it that day. This is not like a 6-month phase out period. So I actually took I had just been to the grocery store the day before. So I had to take a bunch of stuff back to the store, and they gave me a gift card for like $42. I remember this. And with the $42 gift card, I had like this shopping cart full of stuff that I had bought, because there was a lot of processed foods and stuff, not just meat, Gatorades and all this junk that I used to eat. And I took that back. They gave me $42 on the gift card, and I went and bought stuff just from the perimeter of the store. She told me that too. Just walk around the perimeter. That's where the produce and the fruits are. And I got like this one basket full of stuff for the $42. So I remember the difference in the size of stuff, the volume of stuff you could get based on what you were getting. But that's how I got started, just from curiosity and just coming across people who were all having some alternative style of eating besides just the default eat what you like, which is what I've been doing up to that point. And yeah, I've stuck with it ever since.
Yeah. So how did you find that did you find that it affected or kind of helped your level of athleticism when you were training that hard at that time?
For me overall, I didn't notice a stark difference in my performance overall. It didn't make my performance go down. My performance stayed up. I still stayed in shape. I was still playing at a high level. But, or I can say, well, the thing that still made it good is that I knew we can read labels. So I knew that I was putting a lot of junk in my body.
Yeah.
I knew that I was eating a lot of junk, and a lot of stuff that I was drinking was junk. And when I changed over to taking in more, cleaner materials, my performance didn't go down at all. But one thing I know, that my metabolism improved, my digestion improved. I know all of those things improved. I think I had a lot less brain fog overall as well from it. But it wasn't like it was some overnight amazing change for as far as how I could feel performance wise. But I knew I wasn't putting as much junk in my body. And as they say, all deaths are suicides. It's because of the junk that we consistently put in ourselves. So just reducing that was still a plus for me. And as I said, I've kept it up the last 10 plus years.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of people think when I ask that question is to have an answer where it's like my performance increased and I started like, dunking like LeBron and doing all this stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are scared to kind of go in a deficit once they transition to eating plant-based. So if you can maintain your level of athleticism, that's a huge win. And it kind of beats the stereotype that is out there, right, that a vegan is going to be weaker. It's like, hey, I can do the same things that I was doing, just I'm eating different foods and, protecting myself for the long haul, basically.
That's right, because the stuff that you mentioned, I was already doing that stuff. So I was already dunking. I was already running fast. I was already working out every day. I already had no body fat, all of that stuff. So none of it went down. And she had told me, hey, and she had even showed me examples like, hey, here's some athletes who are plant-based you might not have known. I think she mentioned Carl Lewis, who was a Olympic champion. And she mentioned him. He had been plant-based a long time ago before anybody was talking about it. And he was a champion. So it's not like it's impossible. So you're right about that.
Yeah, I think, but obviously at this point, there's so many more athletes that are plant-based. Or I think Chris Paul is obviously a big one for the vegan movement. But what's interesting about, like, at least when I played ball throughout high school and college, man, the culture was you just can eat all the junk food, you drink like all the sugar filled drinks. There's a culture to basketball where you can just eat whatever you want, and a lot of the times you're just fueling yourself with junk food. I remember the tournaments, like there was no healthy food there. So like how was that for you to kind of change your way of eating? Because probably, again, you had a team. I don't know how they were fueling themselves, but how was it for you to kind of make that transition amongst like a sport where the culture is, hey, eat all the processed food you want?
Great question. And I would go further than just saying that in the sport. I would just say in America, period. It was just eat what you want, especially when you're on teams. So at that point, I was playing pro ball. So my first idea was I was going to go completely vegan and not eat meat at all. But then right after I had made that decision, I believe I was in Slovakia. And there was no way I could eat vegan in Slovakia because, first of all, the places that I was eating, a lot of times the people could not speak English, so I couldn't explain to them what I wanted. And secondly, even if I could have explained it to them, they didn't have the options they didn't have the options to serve me the way I needed to be served. So I allowed myself that I would still eat meat at that time. And still to this day, I would still eat meat as just more plant-based. So most of I get meal delivery service. Those meals there's no meat in those. So I made that compromise just because I understood when I was traveling, especially abroad, and if I couldn't speak the language, there was no way I could communicate that. And also because the world hadn't adjusted. By now, I think the world has adjusted more, Maxime, to where if you want to eat a vegan meal, many places have enough options that you can eat and be satisfied. But in 2013, that wasn't a thing in most places. So that's what I would say about that. And as far as just overall in America, period, it was just our thing, especially with athletes and even myself. I'll just use myself as an example. I used to eat whatever I wanted. I ate a ton of junk. I ate ice cream. I ate water ice. I ate candy. I ate cookies. I ate cakes. I ate whatever food I wanted to. I never read labels. And I looked at myself in the mirror and said, well, look at this. I'm good. Doesn't matter what I eat. So then as I learned more and I got more information, and again, I realized that, hey, I might be able to get away with that now, but maybe 20 years from now, can't get away with it anymore. So even though, again, I didn't see a huge change in how I performed physically, I still can say 10 years in, I'm still glad that I made the decision and still stick to it, because it can slowly be deteriorating me, even though I don't see the result yet.
Yeah, and I think that that's the case for a lot of people that have are more like genetically gifted from a metabolism standpoint. Like I'm one of those people. I'll
Correct.
admit it. I'll
Exactly.
admit it too. Is like you could eat pretty much whatever you want, and it wouldn't really show on your body, but you are creating the
Right.
damage behind the scenes,
Hmm.
and it's just it's just not serving you in the long run. Um, so I'd love to transition to kind of the business side of things, because you've accomplished a lot of things, written a lot of books, the TED Talks, all of that. And it feels through consuming your content that a big element of it was mindset. Do you want to kind of dive into that? Because obviously that's a big part of what you teach.
Sure. So the mindset's the foundation of all of it. Yes, it's the foundation of where it all came from, because for me, the mindset was the most important aspect that I needed to, just from that bit that we talked about in the beginning, Maxime, when it came to how are you going to even make a college team because you barely played in high school, or how are you going to make a pro team because you played at this small college that doesn't produce pro athletes. So I had to have the mental toughness and the confidence in myself that I could actually do it. And then again, taking the initiative to go and do something about this belief that I was saying that I had. So it starts with the mentality, because until you have something in your head that you believe you can do, you're not going to take any action on it, or at least not any serious action. So that's where the mindset piece started. And what happened was, once I started playing ball, I'm playing pro, and I'm putting these videos online, and the players were just getting the skill stuff. So here's how you dribble, here's how you shoot, here's how you jump higher, etc. But then they started asking questions about the mindset, because they found out about my background, like the 1 year high school ball, walking on D3 college ball. What's the mentality behind a person who would even keep trying? Because many of them were facing the same setbacks that I had faced 5, 10 years earlier. So
Yeah.
that's when I started talking about the mindset pieces, and the players, they would say, hey, this stuff is really valuable, Jerry. This stuff is even more valuable than the how to do a dribbling drill or how to jump higher. And then as I was sharing those mindset pieces, because the way I was doing it, Maxime, was I did this video called the Weekly Motivation, because I was putting out videos every day by this point. So I started putting out these videos called the Weekly Motivation, and that would be the mindset video, a little selfie video, 2 to 5 minutes in length. And I did those every Monday for 400 Mondays in a row. And in that time period, of course, the athletes appreciated it, but also this is when the people who were not athletes, they started seeing me on the
Yeah.
mindset pieces and said, hey, this stuff applies to us the same way it applies to the ball players. And that's how I knew that I could transition my message, this piece of it, from just a sports audience to a much wider audience.
Yeah. Because it feels like, again, just kind of hearing from your story and reading on your story, that action is one thing. People always get stuck on the plan to get to the outcome that they want, but they never realize
Mm-hmm.
that even if they have the plan and don't have the right mindset, they will never execute the plan. And so how important was it for you to, like, did you, obviously you didn't have the game plan up front of what you were going to do, so how was it for you to kind of develop the game plan as you were kind of like already having the mindset piece in place?
As for when you say the game plan, what piece are you referring to? You mean like my entire career or just the basketball part?
Yeah. From basketball to business, right? Like obviously you didn't necessarily have like, I know I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
this step one, step two, step three, and everything is going to go perfectly. So how did you navigate the inconsistencies of it and kind of figuring out those steps, even though you already had the mindset from the beginning?
Well, the shortcut to that was I connected with someone who did know the steps, someone who actually knew what to do. So I had a mentor when I was deciding I was getting out of basketball. I met someone who was already in the intellectual property slash thought leadership business. She was a full-time professional speaker. She had written books. She had courses. She was coaching people. Many of the things that I do to this day, she was already doing that stuff. And she helped me understand that, hey, you have this thing that you call work on your game. You have some pieces to it. I'd already written a couple books at that point, and I had an audience. And she said, well, this stuff can work really well in the professional world, the non-athlete world. and it can serve these people, but you just have to package it up a certain way. If you want to do speaking gigs, here's what you're going to have to do. You're probably going to have to do something free. You got to get on the phone and call these people. And I just followed the steps of what she was saying. And it's not like everything was just perfect from day one, but I was willing to stick to the disciplines of, okay, let's get on the phone and let's call these leads that are in the CRM, or
Yeah.
let's make sure that the speaking material is in place, and let's go. I'll do some free gigs where I'll even pay my own way to travel somewhere and pay for my own hotel just to go speak, prove that I'm good, and then that should lead to another engagement where I can actually make money. So it was the shortcut was, Maxine, connecting with someone who already knew the ropes and following their guidance, which shortened my learning curve. So instead of it taking me 3 years to figure it out, I could figure it all out in 6 months.
I was hoping that that was your answer because that was my shortcut too. And I feel like that's the part that a lot of people miss is they want to try to figure it all out on their own when you can just pay higher, invest whatever word you want to use into someone that has made all the mistake, that has taken the time to kind of fail and gotten the lessons from failing and just pass them off to you in the most, streamlined and efficient manner.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the shortcut to any success, is to just tap into someone or something that has already gone the path that you want to go on. And then you can just follow them as long as they can explain it. Because some people can do it, but they can't explain it. But so as long as you find a person who can explain what needs to be done, all you got to do is follow that, and you'll get to your result a lot faster. So whatever amount you invest in money, you are actually buying time. And I help people understand that analogy. You're buying time because you're shortening your learning curve. Instead of something taking you a month, it takes you a day. Well, the amount of money you spent to get that information, you just bought 29 days because you just took that month and subtracted all the time you didn't have to use to figure it out by yourself.
Yeah. And, not to kind of do a step out of the interview, but for the people listening, everyone that's around you that's successful has used in this exact same roadmap, the exact same frame. Everyone's bought knowledge. I buy knowledge. We buy knowledge all the time. But the difference, as you and I know, is like there needs to be action. Even though you're buying that knowledge, you're buying those steps from someone that has made the mistakes, is like the consistency of action. So how do you get yourself to show up now that you have this like streamlined process to get to where you want to, because you've hired someone that showed you, like how do you get yourself to stick to those actions? Because I feel that's where a lot of people struggle. I'm in the body recomposition space, so people will pay for a workout plan, pay for a meal plan. You can apply this to every single other industry, but some people sometimes won't stick to it. So like how do you help people with consistency of action?
Well, great question. We have a whole process for that. We call it the third day. And the third day is all about how you show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it. So this could be someone, they sign up for a training program or some, like you said, body recomposition program. And the first day they're all excited because they signed up for it voluntarily. You got them excited and ready to go. And the first day they do everything that's asked of them. Second day, still doing most of the stuff, but they might be slipping just a little bit. And by the third day, they're questioning whether or not they even want to follow the whole program. Because by the third day, that quickly, many human beings, they realize that this thing that I signed up for is not going to be all fun and games. It's not as easy as it looked on TV, metaphorically speaking. And now they have to decide, am I going to keep showing up and actually do this all the way that I said that I would? And that's what we call the third day. And again, it doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3. It can happen any day. You can have a third day every day for a month straight or a year straight. It's just any moment when the newness is worn off, the novelty is gone, and you realize that whatever it is that you signed up for is not one big party, and there's some real work involved. And you get to decide if you're going to show up all the way or if you're not. And that is what truly separates the people who make it from the people who don't. What separates the pros from the amateurs.
So how did you develop that ability to take action earlier on? Because it sounds like some of it was developed, but it sounds like there was a seed of it at the beginning that was like, that's who Dre is. Like that's just a part of who you are. So would you say that a bit of it was there and then the rest was built? Was it that the whole thing was built and acquired? Like, can you kind of explain that? Because it sounds like you were kind of born a little bit with that, like that fire inside of you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I told you that two of my attributes were the athletic genetics and also the competitiveness. So that competition led to me competing against the situations that were in front of me, not even necessarily a person, but the situation. So that absolutely is something that is in me. I had the competitiveness to want to get into something like sports, and a sport like basketball, which has a lot of people who are trying to make it for a few opportunities. So I would definitely attest to that the competitive part was a big piece of it. What was the rest of the question?
Well, just basically what I was trying to lead to is how can people develop that part in them? Because there's a lot of people that have great aspirations, but that struggle with the
Mm-hmm.
consistency muscle, the action taking muscle that for you was through your competitiveness. But some people aren't as competitive, but they want to accomplish great things. So how do you help people kind of develop that muscle?
Well, number one is they have to come up with their anchor. What is the thing that you care about enough that's going to anchor you to the discipline, even when you don't feel like following the discipline? So, what is the outcome that matters the most to you? Because if you don't have a outcome or a big goal or an ambition that you're going after right now in life, well, what's your reason for getting out of bed in the morning? What's the reason for you going to work? Why do you open your laptop or turn on your mic and do anything if you don't have a goal that you're looking to reach? So the first thing is getting clear on what it is you want to achieve. Napoleon Hill said in Think and Grow Rich that a definite chief aim is the starting point of all achievement, so or a burning desire. So what is it that you want to accomplish? And when you're clear on that, then we can kind of build everything else. We can deconstruct everything else from that point, because then we can measure every activity or every behavior by, is this getting us closer to achieving that, or is it getting us further away? So what is the main thing that you want to achieve? It starts with that. Then once that's clear, then what we do is we actually build, now you mentioned this in the intro, that roadmap in reverse, which is like a reverse engineered strategy for how to achieve this outcome. And strategy is simply a plan of action. So when you put that plan of action into place, now it should be getting you step by step closer to where you want to go. And any step that is not getting you there or is not quite working or you're not able to execute on it, we make adjustments. So a strategy is not etched in stone. It's a rough plan of what we're going to do and the directions we're going to go in. So just like I told you, I knew I needed to go to an exposure camp to get seen. Well, the first camp that I thought about might not have been the right one, but this one that I ended up going to ended up being the right one. Then when it came, next step was I need to get a basketball agent. Well, not every agent I called answered. And not every agent I got in touch with was interested. And not every agent who was even interested responded after that I sent them the footage. So it's having a wide enough berth within your strategy that you can make adjustments along the way, but at the same time, having a clear next step in each piece of the strategy. So both of those matter.
Why do you think people fail in the process of wanting to reach those goals? What have you seen from your coaching with your clients that makes people not continue towards their goal?
That's a really good question. Number one is just that apathy of not having a clear goal. If your goal is not clear, then it's going to be hard to keep pushing yourself to get to it. Number two, I would say, is arrogance. A lot of people are just arrogant. And arrogance is a person who just believes that they already know everything, or the stuff that's being taught to them are things that they don't really need. And it doesn't necessarily always mean that they're wrong, but oftentimes, in my experience, they are wrong. People will look at something like mindset was the foundation of what we do here, and they'll say, well, I'm already good on mindset. I already got everything under control when it comes to mindset. I just need someone to show me what to do. Now, a lot of people, I hear that often. And when I
Yeah.
hear that from people, those people who usually say that are usually the very ones who actually have the biggest mindset gaps. They have the
Yeah.
biggest holes in their mentality, but they don't realize that they have gaps in their mentality because they've never had it held up to scrutiny by someone who really understood it. And this is especially true in the entrepreneurship world. It's also especially true in the athletic world. A lot of athletes out there think they're better than they are, better than their results. And a lot of entrepreneurs think they already know stuff that they clearly don't already know, because as soon as that thing that they claim to have known is challenged, their deficiencies start to show. So that second thing is just arrogance. And the challenging thing with arrogance is that often these people don't have the humility to admit that they don't know something, and those people are really beyond help. You can't help a person who doesn't want to be helped. And the third thing that will help people get over this challenge is having a clear strategy and a clear system. System is just can you do the same things the same way every time. So once your strategy is clear, you know it works. having a system that allows you to execute on that strategy over and over and over again with no or very little variation between executions.
Yeah, I feel like if you have to say that your mindset is good, but you haven't accomplished the thing that you want, then the mindset is
Right.
probably the issue.
That's right. That's the foundation, is the mindset.
You're self
Exactly.
hyping. You're self hyping yourself. So so those are some of the notes that I had here. Like some of those four seems like pillars to people being able to achieve their goal. Like you mentioned, was mindset, strategy, system, and accountability. Do you mind touching on accountability and what
Mhm.
that looks like for some of the people that you work with? Because I know it's like you and I need a different level of accountability than potentially someone that is just getting started or someone that, again, depending on the goal,
Right.
it looks different to everyone.
Yeah, and I work with people who are already high level performers. They're already in the top 2% of what they do, and also people who are just getting started. They've only been doing it for 2 weeks or two
Yeah.
days, and they do need different levels of accountability depending on what they're doing and also their personal makeup. Because there are some people out there who want to be held accountable. They want. I've had clients say to me, Dre, I want to be able to just send you a message every day. I'm gonna tell you what I ate, just so I know I got to send that message. I don't have to put on there that I drink another beer or that I had a slice of pizza. So that accountability can apply at different levels. Then there's also the accountability, of course, that's the human accountability. But there's also process accountability, because your process is designed to be done over and over and over again, because the assumption is that that process produces the same result over and over again. So if that process is being followed properly but is not producing the desired result, we have to hold the process accountable as well. So the accountability goes both ways. It goes towards the people and it also goes towards the activities, because both of them can and should be held accountable if and when they are not producing the desired results. And we find out why those lack of results are happening.
So let me dive deeper into some of those processes. So we talked a lot about high performers. I consider myself to be one of those people. I know the challenges that I'm going through, and I know that other people are going through similar challenges. So we'll dive into some deeper stuff. You ever heard of upper limiting before?
I may have heard of the concept, but not that title.
You see read the book The Big Leap,
I've heard of the
Gay
big leap.
Hendricks? Okay. So basically it's a concept of when you get to
I may have.
a new place, a new level in your life where you've never been before, but it's higher
Mm,
than what you think that you deserve, most people will bring themselves back down. So how can people
right.
overcome that aspect of I have surpassed the thing that I wanted to accomplish, or I am at the place of the thing that I wanted to accomplish, but people don't think that they deserve to live there, and then therefore self-sabotage and revert back to their level of what they think they deserve.
Man, well, I've talked about the concept of self sabotaging a lot, and another, I guess this is a version. What you're explaining there is of imposter syndrome. People just they are at a certain level, but they don't think they're good enough to be at that level, and that's a mindset piece. It's a big mindset piece, because whatever space you occupy mentally in the long run, that's the space that you're going to end up in. In the long run of life, we get our expectations. So if you happen to outkick your coverage, so to speak, for a month or a year, you're going to regulate. You're going to, what's the word? Regress to the mean
Mm-hmm.
of what you see yourself as, however it is that you see yourself, regardless of what your results have said up to this point. So that is a big thing. And tell me the rest of that question there that I forgot now since I started talking.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, I wanted to know, like, is it a common thing for high performers to go through that? Because some people think that they're alone in experiencing that. It's like, man, I finally
Mm.
get in shape. I finally make more money. I finally get my business to a certain place. And then every time it just ends up coming back to the place that I was before I made this big push. Like, is it a common thing amongst high performers? Yeah, basically what I'm asking.
It is a common thing, but it depends on why, and it depends on why it becomes common. I think the main reason it becomes common is because many times if people find themselves in the right vehicle at the right time with the right audience, you can create a high level of success without even knowing how you did it. And then if something in those elements that have created your success change, then you start to slip, even though your efforts have not changed. The things that you're doing have not changed. It's just things around you changed because you didn't even know what you didn't know. So that's what happens to a lot of people. It's just their unconscious incompetence of not knowing what they don't know and not even realizing that something has changed about which there's nothing they can do, or at least based on their current knowledge and skills, there's nothing they can do. Therefore, they don't do anything. Then eventually things start to regress. So the biggest reason that this happens is simply because people aren't paying attention and they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like I can use that to, if we use like the platform TikTok, for example, or Vine that were around back in the day, a lot of people got popular on that and then tried to start, it's just a weird analogy, but start like a marketing agency of like, I know how to get views and grow, but it's just because it was a new platform and that skill doesn't really
Right.
translate.
Yeah.
So I feel like working with someone like you or someone that's been around for a longer period of time that has gone through the ups and downs of the market and of the world changing, that's been able to be consistently successful throughout the years, that actually translates to having a better coach or better teachable lessons versus someone that's like a one hit wonder that's like, oh, I figured this out. And it's like, dude, you only been at it for like a year. I think like that's what makes the difference between someone that will self-sabotage more often and someone that won't.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way, but I think you are correct that the longer your track record of success and the more solid that track record, then the less chance that you're going to be beating yourself up or weighing yourself down with your own thoughts, because you know that you've actually done the real work. You know, you put in real time, you faced all the setbacks that your audience is facing and you've overcome them. So there's no reason to doubt yourself when you're in that position. But if you're not, if you haven't done those things, but you're still somehow holding an exalted position, well, you might feel a little bit insecure in that spot.
Yeah. If you haven't been beaten up by life often enough, that's the true acquisition of skill. If you know you can handle shit, is when you've been through it. So love to ask you a question on the flip side. This is actually a conversation I have with my wife, but I love having those kind of like high performance conversation with people. There's this idea of contentment and forever growth, right? Like when is enough enough? And so we always see that balance between the two worlds where someone is like, see, you're a family man, like someone that's going to push to the point where they kind of, lose their family because they want growth. They're trying to feel some type of void. And on the other side, there's people that have a level of contentment that is to a high performer, too low, and something that they would never consider, just kind of chilling for the rest of their life. And so kind of how do you deal with that, that concept with some of the people that you coach, is like, the idea of contentment, when is enough, when to stop pushing, when to continue pushing?
Well, most people I work with are under the age of 50. So none of them is at the contentment stage. All of them are still at the pushing stage. And I market our program as we work with top 2% performers. So these are people who are in the top 2% or they want to be, and they don't want to leave, at least not yet. So I don't run into too many people who are just okay with where they're at. I mean, I run into them, but they're not the people who are coming and talking to us about joining our programs, because they already know just by the way that I talk about things that I say and the way we market what we do. They know that it's not for them. So they don't come around. But those people do exist, period. I think there's way more of them, those people who are content with, or they're aiming for contentment. I just want to be okay. I just want to make enough to be all right and pay my bills and take care of the car, and I'm good. Most people talk like that. So I understand that there are a bunch of those folks, but I'm not looking for them at all. I'm looking for the people who have more of the ambition to grow and advance and get better.
And how do you, because obviously you are a part of that group, so how do you, I'll rephrase the question. Do you believe in balance as you're building this?
Yes, with a caveat. So most people, when they hear the word balance, they think 50-50. I don't think balance has to be 50-50. Balance can be 90-10 as long as it adds up to 100. So balance just means it needs to add up to 100. So the example that I give is like if you're playing 2-on-2 basketball, for example, with LeBron James. Now, both of us are basketball. We have basketball backgrounds, but LeBron's still playing. And I don't know about you, but he'd be better than me right now because I haven't played in 10 years. So if I'm playing with LeBron, I want him to have the ball 90% of the time. Yeah. And the reason is because the goal is for us to win the game. And for us to win the game, he should probably have the ball more than I should have the ball. If we got the ball 50-50, I'm doing a disservice to the team and a disservice to my success by having the ball more than I should have the ball. So balance just means we got to find the right mix that produces the desired outcome. And that does not mean that everybody is going to get the same amount, because everybody is not equal.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way to put it, because I think a lot of people are looking for that when they're trying to build a business or they're trying to improve the quality of their life, they look at balance on a daily perspective versus on like, I look at it on like a quarterly perspective. Like I'll sprint for like 2 months, then I'll take like a 1 week break, and then I'll sprint for 2 months and take a 1 week break. It's like balance is going to look different for different people depending on what's the end goal and what's the outcome that they're trying to create. I think that's beautifully put. I've never heard it being put that way.
That's right, and everything has to have its place. Just like on a basketball team, not everybody gets the same amount of shots, and they shouldn't, because some people are better at scoring, and some people play more defense, some people get the rebounds. So everybody has to have their place.
Absolutely. So, question for you: what is a piece of advice that you've gotten throughout your career? It could be basketball, it could be business, through mentors and coaches, but it was a piece of advice that has been deeply meaningful and powerful for you in shaping the life that you have today.
Thinking of so many things that I've learned. I remember I was playing basketball at LA Fitness in like 2005. This is like maybe after my first job. Playing ball, and this guy approached me in the locker room. He's an older guy. He's probably about 20 years, 15 years older than me. He said, "Dre, you're a really good player. You have talent, but sometimes you were coasting in the pickup games, because me and him were on the same team. And we didn't know each other. He had seen me play for the first time. He's like, you clearly have game, but sometimes you were kind of like not playing as hard as you could." He said, "Be smooth, but don't coast." That was the advice that he gave me. And he was drawing this juxtaposition between two guys who were star players at the time, Kobe Bryant and Tracy McGrady. He said they both have game, but Tracy McGrady, sometimes he coasts. Kobe is smooth, but he doesn't coast. And he was trying to tell me, he was giving me advice like, hey, you got game, but you can't be out there coasting, even though you have game. And he was absolutely right that sometimes I did coast. And he was like, you probably had coaches in your past who told you that. And again, he didn't even know me. And he just pointed that out to me. He was right. I did have coaches who had told me that. So that's the first thing I think of when you say that. What's some advice that I got that I've always followed? So that's one that I can tell you. Going to the business world, I remember one of my first mentors in business, we were talking about delegating and hiring other people to do tasks for us. And I was talking about, well, I could have somebody do this and this and this. And she said, well, the last thing you ever offload is the money. So whatever the main thing is that makes you the money, that's the last thing that you delegate to someone else. You hold on to that one until you're absolutely ready to pass that off. But then you delegate all the other things, all the maintenance tasks. If somebody needs to update the CRM, somebody got to respond to the email, somebody got to edit the website, hire people for that stuff first. Yeah. And whatever the main thing is that makes you money. So if the main thing that makes you money is doing sales calls or standing on stage and speaking or designing courses, never offload that until it's the very last thing that you hand off. Because if somebody messes that up, let them mess up a maintenance task. I'm going to mess up the money. So those are the first two that come to mind.
Yeah, those are good ones. The second one, I follow that model, but the first one, it kind of hit home because like I said, I just played basketball and I was definitely coasting on some of those plays for sure. But I can see how people would.
You're too good for the opponent.
Yeah, I was out of shape, man. I was out of breath. So I was just shooting threes just to kind of make up for it. But I can see how people could do that in business too, right? Like coasting versus kind of being smooth, being like, oh, we made good money for the first 2 weeks. I can just chill for the last 2 weeks of the month. We already hit our quota, versus kind of continuing to be persistent and taking action for the remainder of the month.
Yeah, and there's another one I think of, and it's never lose the momentum. That once you get into momentum, you never want to lose it. When you lose your momentum in the big picture and the small picture. So it's like over the course of a day, like I'm sitting here in my home office. If I sit here for too long and I'm not doing something that is really stimulating for me, then my energy level drops. Even though it's not like I didn't get enough sleep or something like that. My energy level will drop just because I've lost mental momentum. I'm sitting here too long, or I'm doing something I know I shouldn't be doing, like lead sourcing or data entry. Those tasks will put me to sleep even if I got 12 hours of sleep last night, because it's just not the right task for me. Whereas if I'm doing something like this, talking to people like you or recording or writing, I can do it all day with no sleep just because it's the right task for me. So that's the macro momentum. But then, and also in the big picture momentum, even as you're creating success. And it actually goes back to the question you asked earlier about people getting content. How much is,
Yeah.
when is enough enough? That even when you have a lot of success, let's say you have a goal of making $10,000 a month, and then the first 5 days of the month you made 15 grand. If you take your foot off the gas and relax, what happens is you fall out of momentum. So then you get to the end of the month, okay, you already passed your goal because you made 15 the first five days, but it's going to be really hard to get your momentum going back in the next month because you allowed yourself to fall into stagnation because you took your foot off the gas. So even though you've already passed the goal, you should still keep doing whatever it is that you've been doing so that you don't fall out of momentum. Because when you fall out of momentum, it takes more energy to get started up again. And that's a scientific law called the law of inertia. It takes more energy to take something that's not moving to get it into motion and to keep something that's already in motion. So that momentum piece, never lose your momentum, again, in the short, small picture and also the big picture. That's another good piece of advice.
Yeah, because that consistency of action will compound and it will translate to more the next month, right? As you kind of continue, and naturally there's going to be
That's right.
ebbs and flows and highs and lows, and at least when you're in a low, you have so much consistency of compounded behind you that it'll get you through it a lot faster and easier than if you're just like, I haven't done shit in a month and we're slow, then it's so much harder to come back up the hill at that point.
That's right. So I'm glad you brought that up too. So even if, let's say, nothing happened, let's say your goal was 10,000, you made 2,000 in a month. All right. So you just had a bad month. That doesn't mean you should sit around and do nothing. That's only going to make it worse. Right. And then next month you might only make 1,000. So it's keeping the momentum going and doing things, doing something and getting some energy going here, some flow going, even when you're not getting the results that you want to be getting. And that goes right back to what we talked about with the third day, because there's always going to be times, especially when you're in business, when things are just not working. And when you're an athlete, things are just not working. Your team's not winning for whatever reason. You're not feeling that good. You're missing shots, but you can't just stop playing, because then it's going to be even worse. So that's the mental toughness piece right there, is to continue to go even when it's not working.
Yeah. And I feel like the more you've gone through those cycles, the easier it is to go through the cycle. They still suck very much, so especially when you're low. But you have at least, like you said, that that muscle is bigger and is stronger and will carry you through it. He's like, all right, this sucks, and we're in a rut, we're losing a game or whatever it may be. We lost a few games in a row, but at least we know that it will end, right? It's kind of like this too shall pass. The good will pass, the bad will pass, and it's just flowing through it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And as long as you keep the momentum up, hopefully you can influence it to pass and not just wait for it to pass.
Yeah. So, hey, one last question for me. I'd love to ask you, if you had the ability to go back and talk to young Dre, if you could only tell him one thing to do or one thing to focus on, what would that thing be to bring you back to where you are now or at an even further place?
Invest in yourself as quickly as soon as possible and as much as possible. That's where I would start. So I didn't really learn about the concepts. I mean, I always had read books, Maxime. I was always into reading books because my mom's an educator. So I was getting that, like, personal development stuff when I was familiar with it. But I didn't really understand the concept of taking money and using money to get yourself more information or insights or strategies or access that can help you get to a goal faster. I mean, I knew it was a thing. I'd heard of it, but I didn't really understand the value of it until I was like late 20s, early 30s. So if I had known that when I was 15, I probably would have achieved a lot more, a lot sooner. So I would maybe be 10 years ahead of where I am right now had I understood the concept of using money to buy time. So as we talked about earlier, achieving an outcome much faster by using money to get the insight and access instead of just doing it all myself off of hard work and effort and intelligence. And I think I'm a pretty hard worker and a smart guy, but I could have achieved a lot of things a lot faster had I not just been depending on myself as the only resource. So that's number one. And that's what I'll teach my children.
Yeah. And, I may get some hate from people listening to this, but I think that's why poor people stay poor, is they don't take that, even if it's like, yes. Man, I used to spend $10,000 a month on cancer treatments. I used to have like no money. I used to lose money every month because I was spending on treatments. I would just go to the library, rent a free book, and I would read the book and I would implement what was in the book, and I made like $10. And then with the $10, I bought a book. And I was like, okay, I bought a book. Let's read that book. Let's implement what's in that book. And then I made like $50. I was like, shit, let's take that $50 and like buy a little online course. And you kind of work your way up. So I think people, when they want to kind of take action towards changing their life, they think they have to do this grandiose thing of like, well, I need to like be ready and I need to have all the money to get started, and all the situation needs to be perfect, when it could be as simple as like, hey, just go to your community library, rent a book, and start from there and implement what you read after.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the good thing about books is that somebody takes a year or 10 or 20 years of knowledge and experience and they condense it down into something you can consume in a couple weeks or a day, depending on how fast you read. So that's why books are a great way to invest in yourself, even if you don't have a lot of financial resources. So you can at least start with a book if you can't do anything else.
Yeah. What are books that were powerful for you along the way?
Oh man, so many of them. My favorite, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. The
That's the one
Law
with the
of
red
Success
cover,
by
right?
Napoleon Hill. The 48 Laws, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
orange cover. 48
Yeah.
Laws of Power. Yeah. The 50th Law, also by Robert Greene. 33 Strategies of War, also by Robert Greene. So he's my favorite author. So a lot of Robert Greene books. Success Principles by Jack Canfield. He's a chicken soup for the soul guy. And The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss was a big one for me. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is another one. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is another. There's so many. I've read so many books, I can't even remember them all. Letters from a Stoic by Luis Seneca is another one. No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs by Dan Kennedy. That's another great one. But there's so many. I could name books all day.
Yeah. Success Principles, Jack Canfield. You know the concept of E plus R equals O,
Mm.
the equation he talks about in the book? Like event plus response equals
I
outcome.
remember the equation. Yes, I don't remember the. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I remember him saying it. I didn't remember the equation.
Dude, changed my life. I actually have a tattoo. I have a bunch of tattoos, but it's actually tattooed on me because it was such a like instrumental to me pivoting my life. So yeah, that's a great book for anyone listening. Definitely
Right.
recommend that. Um, Beautiful, man. Well, any how can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
I'll give people a free copy of my book, The Third Day. Can I share that?
Yeah, of course. Anything you want.
Okay, sure. So here's the book right here. This again, we talked about this. So the third day is the decision that separates the pros from the amateurs. It's all about how you show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it. So we all have those days when maybe things went great the day before, but we still what happened yesterday has nothing to do with today. And we also have days when nothing's been working, but we still have to show up today and do the job. So that day is what we call the third day, and that is the day that separates the pros from the amateurs because the pros we have to show up every day and work regardless of what happened yesterday and regardless of what we think is going to happen tomorrow. So that's what this book is all about, showing up and delivering consistently. And you can get a free copy of this paperback of this book by going to thirddaybook.com. The book is free. We just ask that you cover the shipping. Just go to thirddaybook.com. We'll mail you a physical copy of this book. And other than that, you can find me on all the social medias. I'm probably most active on Instagram. My Instagram is just my name, at Dre Baldwin. And then everything else we're doing, our main focus is our university, which is where we do all our coaching and courses, etc. You'll find out about all of that once you get into my world because that's what I'm always talking about. So that's how you can find me.
Beautiful. So for everyone listening, I will put all the links down below, including for the book as well. So just to make it easy for you guys to click on there. So if you're listening on audio or on YouTube, all the links will be down there. Dre, man, really appreciate your time to kind of share your expertise, your story. I'm happy we got to talk a little bit more like that in-depth stuff when it comes to being a high performer, because a lot of people talk about the beautiful side of it, but the reality is that, hey, shit, sometimes hard. It's hard, and you have to learn to show up regardless. And so, just massive thank you for your time.
Right.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing your platform, Maxine, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.